My name is Thea Bennett. I'm 31 years old. 3 weeks ago, my mother died on an operating table. She updated her will 3 days before surgery. She left the house to my sister, the car to my brother, the savings to our church. And to me? A sealed envelope with one sentence inside. The lawyer read it out loud. My siblings went pale. My mother never expected me to open it in front of everyone. But I did. And that single sentence didn't destroy me the way she planned. It set me free. I grew up in a house where my family treated me like a guest who overstayed. My mom made sure I knew I was different. My sister made sure I felt it. My brother just followed along. And for 31 years, I accepted the seat they gave me, in the corner, out of frame, out of the conversation. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. And drop a comment with your location and your local time. I always love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to 3 weeks ago. The morning my mother's lawyer called. The call came at 9:14 on a Tuesday. I was at my desk at Morris & Hale Accounting, reconciling a client's quarterly ledger, when my phone buzzed. The screen read, Harold Marsh, attorney at law. I picked up on the third ring. Thea, I'm calling about your mother. His voice was measured, the way lawyers sound when they've delivered this kind of news 100 times. Constance passed this morning. Surgical complications. I set my pen down. The office hummed around me, keyboards clicking, the copier running. Everything normal. Everything continuing. I'm sorry, Harold said. Thank you for telling me. A pause. Then, there's something I need to discuss with you. Your mother updated her will 3 days before the procedure. There are some unconventional elements. I'd recommend you attend the reading. Unconventional. The word hung there like a door left ajar. When? I asked. Next Wednesday. My office. 10 a.m. I wrote it down on a sticky note, the same way I'd write a client appointment. Date, time, location, as if it were routine. It wasn't. The last time I'd spoken to my mother was 4 months ago. She'd called to remind me that Vivian's anniversary dinner was black tie, and that I shouldn't bother coming if I was going to wear that gray thing again. I told her I wasn't coming at all. She said, Good, one less chair to worry about. And that was it. 4 months of silence. Then Harold Marsh on a Tuesday morning, telling me she was gone. I didn't cry at my desk. I didn't leave early. I finished the ledger, emailed it to my manager, and drove home at 5 like always. I'd already grieved my mother years ago. The surgery just made it official. Growing up in the Bennett house was like living inside a photograph where someone had smudged out one face. Vivian had my mother's sharp cheekbones and auburn hair. Kyle had Robert's square jaw and easy grin. And then there was me, dark-eyed, olive-skinned, with a face that matched no one on either side of the family tree. My mother noticed. She made sure everyone else noticed, too. Vivian has my eyes, she'd tell her church friends over Sunday coffee. Kyle has Robert's chin. Then she'd glance at me, 12 years old, sitting right there with a cookie in my hand, and say, Thea, I don't know where she came from. The women would laugh politely. I'd stare at the crumbs on my plate. The family photos told the same story. Vivian in the center, blonde and beaming. Kyle beside her, hand on her shoulder. My mother behind them, arms draped like a crown. And me, standing at the edge, half-cropped, sometimes missing entirely. We ran out of space in the frame, my mother would say. Robert, my father, or the man I believed was my father, never pushed back. He was a quiet man, kind, but passive. He'd ruffle my hair at breakfast and slip me an extra $5 on my birthday, but he never once told Constance to stop. He just looked away, the way people do when the weather is bad and they can't change it. He passed when I was 23. Heart attack, quick and final. At his funeral, I stood near the back. My mother leaned into a friend's ear while the casket was still open. I caught 3 words. At least he never knew. I didn't understand then. I filed those words away in a place I didn't visit often, but I never forgot them. Vivian was 35, married to Greg Cole, and living in a house our mother helped fund. Down payment, Constance. Kitchen remodel, Constance. The Lexus in the driveway. A birthday surprise from Constance. Vivian called herself self-made. Kyle was 28 and hadn't held a job longer than 6 months in his entire adult life. Dog walker, barback, assistant to a real estate agent who fired him after 3 weeks. Through all of it, our mother paid his rent. 3 years running. I put myself through the University of Georgia on a merit scholarship and a part-time bookkeeping gig at a hardware store. Nobody paid my rent. Nobody co-signed my lease. When I graduated, the only person who showed up was my roommate's mom, who clapped for me out of pity. Constance didn't come. She said the drive was too far. It was 47 minutes. So when Vivian and Kyle called me the accountant, always with that little smirk, like counting other people's money was something to be ashamed of, I let it pass. I had a degree, 0 debt, and my own apartment. They had Constance's credit card and matching attitudes. 3 days before the surgery, Vivian called me. Mom's going in for her heart. Don't come. She didn't ask for you. I stayed home. Constance went in. Constance didn't come out. That evening, Vivian posted on Facebook a photo of the family in the hospital waiting room, her, Kyle, Greg, Aunt Patricia, Pastor Tom. Everyone circled around a vending machine like it was a vigil candle. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people she loved most." I stared at that photo for a long time. I wasn't in it. I was never in the photos. And now, I'd never have the chance to be. Harold called again 2 days later. This time his voice carried something I couldn't quite place. Urgency stitched beneath professionalism. I want to make sure you're planning to attend, Thea. It's your legal right. I know. I strongly recommend it. Strongly recommend. Lawyers don't use that phrase casually. They say you may wish to consider, or it might be advisable. Harold said strongly, recommend the way a doctor says you need to come in for your results. I sat with it that night. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchen counter that doubled as my desk, a window that faced the parking lot. I'd built this life piece by piece, no help, no safety net. Walking into that reading meant walking back into the one place I'd spent a decade walking away from. But if I didn't go, Vivian and Kyle would control the whole story. They'd divide up whatever Constance left, shape the narrative, and I'd be erased all over again. Not from a photograph this time, from a legal document. The next morning at the office, my coworker Jenna noticed the sticky note on my monitor. Harold Marsh, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Everything okay? She asked. My mother left me something. I don't know what, but I have a right to be in that room. Jenna leaned against the cubicle wall. After everything she did, you're still going? I pulled the sticky note off the monitor and pressed it into my planner. Not for her, for me. Wednesday came fast. I ironed a navy blouse, put on the 1 pair of heels I owned, and drove to Harold Marsh's office on Main Street. My hands were steady on the wheel. My stomach was not. The parking lot had 4 cars already. I was the last to arrive. Harold's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street. 2nd floor, narrow staircase, the kind of place where the air smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The conference room was small. Oak table, leather chairs, framed diplomas on the wall, blinds half drawn against the morning sun. Everyone was already seated. Vivian sat at the far end, legs crossed, wearing black like she'd coordinated it with a stylist. Greg was beside her, scrolling his phone. Kyle slouched in the middle chair, one ankle over his knee, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, sat near the door, clutching her purse with both hands. Pastor Tom Harding from Crestfield Community Church was there too, a leather notebook open in front of him, representing the church as a named beneficiary. And at the head of the table, Harold Marsh, silver-haired, wire-rimmed glasses, a manila folder, and one sealed envelope laid out in front of him. I stepped inside. The room went quiet. Vivian looked up. "Oh, you came." Kyle half laughed. "Mom would have found that funny." I said nothing. I pulled out the empty chair, the one closest to the door naturally, and sat down. Harold gave me a small nod. Aunt Patricia reached across and squeezed my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. "Your mother was a complicated woman," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I didn't know what she meant yet, but something in her voice, the weight of it, the way she held my hand a beat too long, made me think she wasn't just talking about the will. Harold opened the manila folder. On the table beside it, in plain sight, the sealed envelope. My name written on the front in blue ink, shaky cursive, unmistakably my mother's hand. For Thea. Now I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever walked into a room where everyone looked at you like you didn't belong, and you stayed anyway, then you already know what this moment felt like. The reading hadn't even started, and I could feel my sister's satisfaction from across the table. If this story is hitting close to home, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next in that room? My mother thought she planned it perfectly. She didn't. Harold cleared his throat and began reading. "I, Constance Marie Bennett, of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils." The room was still. Vivian's chin tilted upward, just slightly, the posture of someone expecting good news. "To my eldest daughter, Vivian Louise Cole, I leave the property at 44 Maple Drive, Crestfield, Georgia, including all furnishings and fixtures therein." Vivian didn't flinch. She'd known, or guessed. Greg put a hand on her knee. "Not comfort, congratulations." "To my son, Kyle Robert Bennett, I leave the 2019 Ford F-150 pickup truck and all contents of the garage at 44 Maple Drive." Kyle pumped his fist under the table. "The truck too? Nice." Harold continued without looking up. "To Crestfield Community Church, I leave the entirety of my savings account, currently valued at approximately $47,000, to be used at the discretion of the pastoral board." Pastor Tom wrote something in his notebook, a polite smile, a quiet thank you to no one in particular. Then Harold paused. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with his tie, and put them back on. He looked directly at me. "And to my daughter, Thea Marie Bennett, this envelope, to be opened at the reading." He lifted the sealed envelope and held it across the table. The room shifted. Vivian turned to me, and for one brief second, her expression cracked open. A smile, small and sharp, like a paper cut. "Well," she said, "Mom always knew what each of us deserved." Kyle leaned back. "A letter. That's kind of poetic, right? Mom always had a flair for drama." I took the envelope from Harold's hand. It weighed nothing. Everything my mother owned, divided 3 ways, and my share fit in my palm. The envelope sat in my hands, cream-colored, standard size, sealed with the kind of adhesive that yellows with time. My name in blue ink, slanted right, pressed hard into the paper. My mother had written this with intention. Vivian spoke first. "Well, open it. We're all waiting." Kyle grinned. "Maybe it's an apology." He didn't mean it. The room knew he didn't mean it. Aunt Patricia watched me from across the table, her lips pressed thin. Her eyes kept flicking between the envelope and Harold, like she was bracing for something. Harold folded his hands. "Thea, you're not obligated to open it here. You can take it home and read it privately." Vivian cut in fast. "Mom's will says at the reading, right, Harold?" "It says to be opened at the reading," Harold replied carefully. "But Thea has the right to—" "I'll open it." The words left my mouth before I'd fully decided. But once they were out, I meant them. If my mother had something to say to me, the last thing she'd ever say, I wasn't going to read it alone in my apartment at midnight. I was going to read it here, in front of the people she actually loved, in the room she designed for this moment. I slid my thumb under the flap and tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of white paper, folded once. I unfolded it. One sentence, handwritten, blue ink, same slant, same pressure. I read it. My eyes moved across the words, then back to the beginning, then across again. My face didn't change. I made sure of that. The room held its breath. I looked up at Harold. "Read it out loud, please." Harold blinked. "Thea, read it. Out loud." I handed the paper to Harold. He took it, adjusted his glasses, and read silently first. I watched the color leave his face. He set the paper flat on the table, pressed his fingertips against the edge, and looked at me. I nodded. Harold read, "Thea is not Robert Bennett's daughter. Her father is Douglas Prescott." Silence. 3 seconds. 5, 7. The clock on the wall behind Harold ticked loud enough to fill the room. Vivian's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What?" Kyle stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. That's not possible." Aunt Patricia closed her eyes and exhaled. Long, slow, like she'd been holding it for decades. She didn't gasp. She didn't look confused. She looked like someone who'd been waiting for this and dreading it in equal measure. Pastor Tom set his pen down gently and stared at the table. Diana, Harold's secretary, sat in the corner taking notes. Her hand had stopped moving. She stared at the page in front of her, pen frozen mid-word. Greg leaned forward, mouth open, no sound coming out. And me? I sat still. My hands were flat on the table. My spine was straight. Inside something was shifting, tectonic, deep, the kind of movement that rearranges everything but doesn't make a sound. 31 years, every holiday I spent on the outside, every photo I was cropped from, every time my mother looked at me like I was a stranger standing in her kitchen, I finally knew why. "So that's why," I said quietly. "That's why I never fit." Harold placed the paper back in the envelope. His hands were not steady. Vivian's face had gone white. Kyle was gripping the edge of the table, and the room, that small wood-paneled, diploma-lined room, had just split wide open. Vivian recovered first. She always did. "This changes the will." Her voice was sharp, clipped. "She's not even a Bennett. Legally, she shouldn't." "Legally, the will stands as written," Harold said. He hadn't moved from his seat. "Thea is named as a beneficiary. She received the envelope. The distribution is complete." "An envelope?" Kyle's voice cracked. "She gets an envelope and you're calling that a distribution?" "It's what your mother specified." Vivian turned to me, jaw tight. "You understand what she did, right? Mom put that in there to tell you, you don't belong here. You were never one of us." I let the sentence land, let it sit in the air for everyone to hear. Then I spoke. "Maybe she did. Or maybe she just gave me something none of you got." "What?" Vivian's lip curled. "A scandal?" "The truth." Harold cleared his throat. The room turned back to him. He removed his glasses again, pinched the bridge of his nose, and spoke with the kind of deliberateness that meant every word was chosen. "I should note, for the record and for everyone present, that Douglas Prescott was a circuit court judge in this county. He passed away 2 years ago." The air changed. I felt it. Vivian felt it. Everyone felt it. The Prescott name in Crestfield carried weight, real weight. The courthouse bore his plaque. The high school scholarship fund bore his name. His obituary had run on the front page of the county paper. Vivian's expression shifted, from anger to something colder. Calculation. Kyle sat down slowly. Greg whispered something to Vivian. She shook her head. I picked up the envelope from the table and placed it in my bag. My hands were steady now. "You got the house," I said to Vivian. "You got the car," I said to Kyle. "I got the truth. Let's see which one matters more." People filed out in silence. Vivian left first, heels clicking fast down the stairs, Greg trailing behind her with his phone already at his ear. Kyle lingered in the hallway, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. Aunt Patricia touched my elbow as she passed and said nothing, just pressed her lips together and walked out. Pastor Tom paused at the door. "I'll pray for your family, Thea." "Thank you, Pastor." Then it was just me and Harold. He waited until the downstairs door shut. Then he closed the conference room door, sat back down, and folded his hands on the table. "Thea, I need to tell you something, not as your mother's lawyer, but as someone who knows this county's legal landscape." I sat back down. "Judge Douglas Prescott set up a trust before he passed," Harold said. "Part of it includes a provision for a biological child he believed existed but could never identify or locate." The sentence hung between us. "How do you know this?" I asked. "His estate attorney, a man named James Whitfield, contacted me 2 years ago. He asked if I knew anything about a potential child connected to the Bennett family." Harold paused. "At the time, I didn't. I had no reason to think. And now you do." "Now I do." I looked down at the envelope in my bag. A single sentence my mother wrote to wound me, to exile me from the only family I'd ever known. She'd designed it as a final blow, a posthumous punishment delivered in public. But Harold was sitting across from me with a look on his face I'd never seen from anyone in my life. It was the look of someone handing you a key. "Your mother meant this letter as a weapon," he said. "She may have just handed you a door." That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open and typed 2 words into the search bar. Douglas Prescott. The results filled the screen. 30 years on the circuit court bench. A reputation for fairness. Firm but humane. The kind of judge lawyers respected even when he ruled against them. Appointed by the governor, reconfirmed twice, retired 5 years before his death. His wife, Catherine, passed when he was 52. Cancer. He never remarried. He had 1 daughter, Margaret Prescott Hale. Maggie, the articles called her. Retired schoolteacher. Still lived on the family property outside Crestfield. I scrolled through images. Courthouse ceremonies, charity events, a profile piece in the county paper from 8 years back. There was a quote that stopped me cold. An interviewer had asked Prescott about regrets. He'd said, "My one regret is the people I couldn't reach in time." I stared at that line until the screen dimmed. Then I pulled up his photo, a formal portrait from his last year on the bench. Gray hair, strong jaw, dark eyes. I zoomed in. His eyes were my eyes. The same shade, the same slight downward tilt at the outer corners. His nose, my nose, the same narrow bridge. I'd spent 31 years in a family where I looked like no one. And here, on a county government website, in a portrait of a dead judge I'd never met, I finally saw my own face. He'd been 50 minutes away. My whole life. The same county. The same grocery store probably. The same 4th of July parade down Main Street. 50 minutes and 31 years. I closed the laptop, pressed my palms flat on the counter, breathed. My mother hadn't just hidden the truth from me. She'd hidden me from him. Vivian called the next morning. No pleasantries. "I hope you're not entertaining this. Mom was sick, she wrote nonsense." "She wrote it 3 days before surgery," I said. "She was lucid enough to update her entire will." "A will is one thing, a scribbled accusation is another." "It's not an accusation, Vivian, it's a confession." Silence. Then, "You can't use a dead woman's letter to chase someone else's money." "I haven't chased anything, but I won't pretend I didn't read what she wrote." Vivian's breathing went sharp. "You've always done this, always found a way to make yourself the victim." "I'm not a victim, I'm just informed now. There's a difference." She hung up. 20 minutes later, Kyle texted. 3 messages in a row. "If you go after Prescott money, we'll contest the whole will. You won't get the envelope either. Think about what you're doing." I screenshotted the messages, saved them. Not for any legal purpose, just as a record. A reminder of how fast family loyalty evaporates when someone's inheritance is at stake. That afternoon, Greg called Harold's office. I know because Harold told me later. Greg had been shouting, "Your client is destabilizing this family." Harold's response, per his own account, was calm. "My client is Constance Bennett's estate. All 3 children are beneficiaries. I represent the estate. I'd suggest everyone retain separate counsel going forward." By evening, Vivian had posted on Facebook again. Not about me specifically. She was too strategic for that. Just a vague, targeted quote. "When someone shows up to take what isn't theirs, remember who was really there." 43 likes within an hour. Then, right before midnight, Vivian called once more. This time her voice was ice. "We'll make sure everyone knows what Mom wrote about you, the whole town." I said, "You can't unring that bell, Vivian. It's already ringing." The funeral was held on a Saturday at Crestfield Community Church. White clapboard walls, stained glass, a pipe organ that wheezed on the high notes. 80, maybe 90 people packed the pews. Neighbors, church members, women from Constance's book club, men who'd known Robert. Vivian had organized everything. The flowers, the program, the slideshow looping on a screen next to the casket. Childhood photos, holidays, church picnics. Not a single image included me. She delivered the eulogy from the pulpit, hands folded, voice trembling at exactly the right moments. Mom was a devoted mother. To me, to Kyle. She gave us everything she had. Her home, her time, her heart. 2 children. She mentioned 2. I sat in the 4th row. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Everyone in that church could count. When the eulogy ended, I stood to place my flowers on the casket. White lilies, simple. I walked to the front, set them beside the spray, and turned to go back to my seat. Vivian caught my arm as I passed. She leaned in, close enough that the first 3 rows could hear. "You shouldn't be here. You're not family. Mom made that clear." I pulled my arm free, gently, without rushing. The whispers started before I reached my pew. Kyle stood near the exit with his arms crossed. United front. Pastor Tom watched from the side door. He looked pained. He didn't intervene. And in the last row, almost hidden, almost overlooked, an older woman I recognized, but hadn't spoken to in years. Ruth Calloway, longtime neighbor, friend of my mother's. Ruth had heard Vivian. Her eyes were wide. Her hands gripped the hymnal in her lap. She knew something. I could see it. But today wasn't the day. Crestfield is the kind of town where news doesn't travel, it migrates. By Monday, the whole county knew. Constance Bennett's middle daughter wasn't Roberts. Her real father was Judge Douglas Prescott. The letter said so. The lawyer read it out loud. I felt it everywhere. At the grocery store, the cashier held my gaze a beat too long. At the gas station, a woman I vaguely recognized smiled at me with exaggerated warmth, the way people do when they want you to know they've heard. At work, Jenna set a coffee on my desk without a word. My manager, Paul, walked by and said, "Door's open if you need it." He'd never said that before. Vivian's Facebook post was circulating. Screenshots of her vague but pointed quote had landed in group chats across the county. When someone shows up to take what isn't theirs. People were connecting dots. I didn't respond, didn't post, didn't explain. I went to work. I came home. I read more about Douglas Prescott. Then Harold called. "Thea, the Prescott estate attorney James Whitfield wants to meet with you. He's been looking for you, or rather, for the person your mother described, for 2 years. Why 2 years? That's how long it's been since the judge passed. The trust has a provision that's been waiting to be activated. Whitfield reached out to me back then, but I had no leads." Harold paused. "Your mother's letter connected the last piece." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the envelope on my counter. That cream-colored rectangle with my name in blue ink. My mother meant it as a coffin nail. A parting shot from beyond the grave. Instead, it was turning into a roadmap. I'll meet with him, I said. When? Vivian and Greg showed up at my apartment Thursday evening. No phone call, no warning. Just a knock at 7 p.m. and the two of them standing on my doorstep like debt collectors. Vivian held a manila folder. Greg stood behind her with his arms crossed, doing his best impression of authority. We need to talk, Vivian said. I didn't invite them in. They came in anyway. Vivian opened the folder on my kitchen counter and pulled out a single typed page. Sign this. I picked it up. Legal language, but not drafted by a lawyer, I could tell. Too many formatting errors, too much emotion disguised as legalese. The document stated that I, Thea Marie Bennett, acknowledged I was not the biological daughter of Robert James Bennett, and that I waived any current or future claim to the Bennett estate. Then I reached the final clause. It asked me to relinquish any association with the Bennett family name. I read it twice. You want me to sign away my last name? Vivian's jaw tightened. It was never really yours. Greg added. Vivian's right. This keeps things clean, for everyone. I set the paper back on the counter. You came to my home, uninvited, to ask me to erase myself. I looked at Vivian. The answer is no. Thea, the door is behind you. Vivian's face went red. She snatched the paper and shoved it back in the folder. Greg was already turning toward the door, but Vivian stopped at the threshold. She didn't look back. She just spoke to the hallway. If you don't sign, I'll make sure the whole county knows you're chasing a dead judge's money. I'll make you look exactly like what you are. I closed the door, locked it, leaned against it. My hands were shaking. Just a little. But my answer wasn't. James Whitfield's office was on the second floor of the Prescott Professional Building, a name I'd passed 100 times without ever registering what it meant. Brick facade, brass letters, a parking lot shaded by magnolia trees. The office was larger than Harold's. Warmer, too. Built-in bookshelves, leather furniture, a framed portrait of Judge Prescott on the wall behind the desk. I stood in front of it for a long moment before Whitfield came in. You look like him, Whitfield said from the doorway. He was mid-60s, silver beard, reading glasses on a chain, especially around the eyes. We sat across from each other. He opened a file. Judge Prescott established a trust 3 years before his death. It includes a provision for any biological child confirmed by DNA testing. Whitfield paused. He told me, in those exact words, if she ever surfaces, make sure she knows I looked for her. My throat tightened. He knew about me? He knew your mother had a child. He didn't know your name. He didn't know where you were. Whitfield set his glasses down. He tried. He reached out through intermediaries, paid an investigator for 6 months. Your mother blocked every attempt, changed her phone number twice, moved parishes. I looked at the portrait on the wall, dark eyes, same as mine. He asked me to leave his wife, Whitfield continued quietly. Your mother, I mean. She asked him to leave Catherine. He said no. He told me once, she never forgave me for choosing my family, and she made sure I'd never find my daughter because of it. My hands sat in my lap. They were not still. There's one more thing, Whitfield said. His daughter, Margaret, Maggie. She wants to meet you. She's been hoping this day would come. Outside the window, a cardinal landed on the magnolia branch, red against green, bright and impossible to miss, like a truth that's been there all along. I'm going to pause right here, because what James Whitfield just told me, he said, if she ever surfaces, make sure she knows I looked for her. That hit me in a place I didn't know could still hurt. A father I never met had been searching for me, while the mother I grew up with was hiding me. If you know what it feels like to find out someone loved you from a distance, drop "he looked for me" in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened with the DNA test. The DNA test took 10 days. 10 days of going to work, balancing ledgers, eating lunch at my desk, and pretending the world wasn't rearranging itself beneath my feet. Whitfield arranged the test through a certified lab. He compared my sample against medical records Judge Prescott had on file. a routine genetic panel from 5 years before his death. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. 99.98% match, Whitfield said. You are the biological daughter of Douglas Allen Prescott. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside Morrison Hale. The engine was off. The windows were up. I pressed the phone against my ear and listened to Whitfield explain what came next. The trust provision activated upon confirmed biological parentage. It included a parcel of farmland, 40 acres on the east side of the county, currently leased to a local agricultural co-op, generating roughly $28,000 annually. An investment account valued at approximately $340,000. And access to the guest cottage on the Prescott estate property. Total value of the provision, approximately $620,000. I did the math involuntarily. It's what accountants do. My mother's entire estate, the house, the truck, the savings, was worth about $180,000. Before the lien, $620,000. My mother thought she left me nothing. She left me the one sentence that unlocked everything. There's something else, Whitfield said. Maggie's invited you to the estate this Saturday. She wants to show you the cottage, and your father's study. Your father. 2 words I'd never heard directed at me before. Not like this. Not meaning someone who actually wanted me. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes after the call ended. I didn't drive. I didn't cry. I just breathed. The Prescott estate sat at the end of a gravel road lined with pecan trees. A 2-story farmhouse, white clapboard, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs and hanging ferns. Beyond it, the fields stretched flat and gold under the October sky. Maggie Prescott Hale was waiting on the porch. 60 years old, silver hair pulled back in a loose braid, broad shoulders, sturdy hands. A teacher's posture, upright, patient, ready. She saw me before I reached the steps. I would have known you anywhere, she said. You have his eyes. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't have words. She didn't wait for them. She walked down, took both my hands in hers, and held them. Welcome home, Thea. I'm sorry it took this long. She led me inside. Through a hallway with creaking floors and family photos, the kind I'd never been in. Through a kitchen that smelled like coffee and something baking. Into a study at the back of the house, Judge Prescott's study. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling books, a desk with a green lamp. And on that desk, in a plain silver frame, a photograph. A little girl, 5 years old. Brown hair, dark eyes, a gap-toothed smile. Me. He kept it there for years, Maggie said. Someone sent it to him. He never told me who. He just called you the one I couldn't find. I picked up the frame. My hands shook. He talked about you, Maggie said softly. He said your mother was... Well, he had kinder words than I would. She paused. Dad once told me. She asked me to leave Catherine. I couldn't. And she never forgave me. He didn't know she'd punish a child for it. I held the photograph, 5 years old, smiling. 31 years later, standing in his study, I finally understood where I came from. The news hit Crestfield the way a tree falls, slowly at first, then all at once. Thea Bennett, confirmed biological daughter of Judge Douglas Prescott, beneficiary of the Prescott Family Trust, $620,000. Vivian's call to Harold lasted 11 minutes. I know because Harold told me. This is fraud, she said. Mom was delusional. That letter means nothing. Harold's response was the same as it had been in the conference room. Measured. Immovable. The letter was written by a competent adult 3 days before a planned surgery. I witnessed the will signing. The DNA confirms the content of the letter. There is no basis for a fraud claim. Vivian hung up. Kyle called me that evening. He didn't yell. He just sounded hollowed out. So you're a Prescott now? Congratulations. Must be nice to luck into money you didn't earn. I didn't earn Mom's love either, I said. But that didn't stop you from taking what she gave you. Silence. A long one. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, Vivian called Aunt Patricia. I heard about this secondhand, Patricia told me weeks later. Vivian demanded Patricia testify that Constance had been confused when she wrote the envelope, that she'd been on medication, that the letter was the product of a deteriorating mind. Patricia's answer was short. Your mother was many things. Confused was never one of them. Vivian slammed the phone down. By Friday, Greg filed a legal challenge to Constance's will. The claim, undue influence and mental incapacity. The argument that someone, unnamed but clearly meaning me, had manipulated a dying woman into writing a fabricated confession. The challenge was filed in the same courthouse where Judge Douglas Prescott had served for 30 years. The irony wrote itself. Vivian came to my apartment one more time. Alone. No folder. No Greg. Just her, in a black cardigan and smudged eyeliner, standing in my doorway looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. You're tearing this family apart, she said. What family? I stepped back but didn't invite her in. The one where Mom erased me from photos? The one where you told me not to come to the hospital? Vivian's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the floor. She was protecting us from what? The truth? I kept my voice level, low. Mom spent 30 years protecting herself, and you helped. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. Vivian stood in the doorway, her lip trembled. For a moment, just a flash, I saw something underneath the armor. Fear. Genuine, unpolished fear. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what her life looked like now that the scoreboard had flipped. I'm your sister, she said. You told me I wasn't. At Mom's funeral, in front of 80 people, you said, and I'm quoting, "You're not family." Vivian wiped her eyes. I was upset. You were clear. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. She turned and walked toward the stairs. No argument, no door slam. She just pulled the door shut, gently, quietly, and disappeared. Somehow, the gentle close was worse than a slam. I locked the door, leaned against the counter. The apartment was quiet. The same quiet I'd lived in for years. Small rooms, no family photos on the walls, a life built entirely on my own terms. But tonight it felt different. The silence wasn't loneliness. It was a choice. You drew the line, Vivian, I said to the empty room. I'm just standing on the side you put me. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. Greg's attorney, a young guy from the next county who clearly took the case for the fee, not the merit, presented the argument. Constance Bennett was elderly, preparing for surgery, emotionally vulnerable. The sealed letter was a product of confusion or coercion. The will should be revisited. Harold stood up and dismantled it in under 10 minutes. Constance Bennett was 63. She drove herself to my office. She reviewed every clause of the will, asked 2 clarifying questions, and signed in the presence of 2 witnesses, myself and my secretary, Diana Wells. She added the sealed envelope as a personal addendum and specified in her own handwriting that it be opened at the reading. He paused. Furthermore, the petitioner's claim of undue influence names no influencer. Thea Bennett had not spoken to her mother in 4 months prior to her death. She did not know about the envelope's existence until the reading. She did not request it. She did not draft it. She simply opened it. The judge, a woman named Torres, who had served alongside Prescott years ago, reviewed the documents. She looked at Greg's attorney. She looked at Harold. There is no evidence of undue influence, no evidence of diminished capacity. The will stands as written. Greg's attorney gathered his papers quickly. Greg stood up red-faced and started speaking loudly in the hallway. Vivian pulled him by the arm toward the exit. Kyle sat in the back row. He hadn't said a word the entire hearing. As I walked out, he caught my eye. Just for a second. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pity. It was the look of someone seeing clearly for the first time and not liking what he saw. 2 days later, Kyle sent me a text. 1 line. I didn't know about the letter. I didn't know any of it. The signing took place at Whitfield's office on a Tuesday morning. Sunlight came through the blinds in gold stripes. Maggie sat beside me. Whitfield sat across. A stack of documents fanned out on the desk like a hand of cards. "This transfers the trust provision to your name," Whitfield said. 40 acres of leased farmland, an investment account currently valued at $341,000, and the guest cottage on the Prescott estate with lifetime residency rights. I signed each page, carefully, the way I'd sign a client's tax return, because that's what I knew. Numbers, documents, the language of things that are real and recorded. Maggie signed as witness. She set her pen down and placed her hand on my arm. "Dad would have wanted you to know. This isn't charity. This is what was always yours." I looked at the numbers. 620,000, more money than I'd ever seen in one place, more than my mother's entire estate, several times over. Vivian inherited a house with a $65,000 lien. Kyle inherited a truck worth $8,000 on a good day, and the $47,000 in savings went to the church. My mother divided her life into pieces and gave the biggest ones to the children she loved. To me, she gave a sentence. One sentence, designed to exile me. Instead, it brought me here, signing papers in a sunlit office with a sister I'd never known, and a last name I was just beginning to understand. Whitfield extended his hand. "Congratulations, Thea." I shook it. "Thank you." Maggie hugged me at the door. "He built that cottage for someone," she said. "I always wondered who. I think it was you." I signed my name 31 times that morning. Every time I wrote, "Thea Bennett." I earned that name, every year of it. Vivian found out about the lien on a Wednesday. She'd gone to the bank to refinance the house, planning renovations, already picking out countertops, and the loan officer handed her a printout with a number she didn't recognize. $65,000. A second mortgage Constance had taken out 4 years ago to cover mounting medical bills. The house at 44 Maple Drive wasn't a gift. It was a debt wrapped in a deed. Kyle's truck wasn't much better. A 2019 F-150 with 120,000 miles, a transmission that groaned on hills, and a resale value that wouldn't cover 6 months of rent. He found this out when the mechanic quoted him $2,200 for repairs and said, "Honestly, I'd sell it." And the $47,000 in savings, the only liquid asset, was already at the church. Earmarked. Gone. Vivian called Harold. I didn't hear the call directly, but Harold told me the broad strokes. "She left us garbage," Vivian said. She was crying. "She left Thea everything." Harold's response as he recounted it to me was the most restrained sentence I've ever heard a lawyer deliver. "She left you what she had. She left Thea a secret. The secret had consequences she didn't anticipate." "It's not fair," Vivian said. Harold paused. "No, it's not." He wasn't agreeing with Vivian. He was stating a fact about the entire situation, every part of it, from the beginning. None of it was fair. Not for Vivian, not for Kyle, not for me, and certainly not for the man who spent 20 years trying to find his daughter while his lover hid her 50 minutes away. My mother was a planner. She allocated her assets like weapons, aimed precisely at the people she wanted to reward and the ones she wanted to destroy. She just didn't plan for the truth to have a higher value than the house. Kyle texted me on a Saturday morning. "Can we meet? Just us." We sat in a booth at Decker's Diner on Route 9, halfway between my apartment and the auto shop where he'd just started working. He ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. Neither of us touched it for a while. "I was always the tag-along," he said. He stared at the table. "Mom told me what to think. Vivian told me what to do. I didn't question it." "And now?" He looked up. "Now I own a truck that needs a new transmission and a sister I never actually talked to." It was the most honest thing Kyle had ever said to me, maybe the most honest thing he'd ever said to anyone, I'm not asking for money, he said quickly. I want to be clear about that. I know. I'm asking if there's still a door open. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The coffee was lukewarm. The diner was mostly empty. Just us and a couple in the corner sharing a plate of eggs. The door was never locked, Kyle. You just never knocked. He nodded. Slowly, like he was absorbing it. Then he said something I didn't expect. Mom had a journal. A leather-bound one she kept in the attic at Maple Drive. I saw it once when I was helping her move boxes. She grabbed it out of my hands before I could read anything. He paused. Vivian doesn't know about it. A journal. Written in Constance's own hand. Stored in the attic of the house Vivian just inherited. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Kyle picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it down. Because whatever Mom wrote in that thing, I think you deserve to know more than anyone. Kyle had a key. Vivian was at a hair appointment. We went in through the back door. The house smelled the same, lavender air freshener and something stale underneath, the scent of a place that had stopped being lived in and was just being owned. The attic was narrow, cobwebbed, crowded with boxes labeled in Constance's handwriting. Christmas ornaments, Robert's clothes, tax files 2004 to 2012. Behind a stack of old quilts, on a shelf above the water heater, we found it. A leather-bound journal, dark brown, edges worn smooth. No title, no label, just pages and years. I sat on the attic floor and opened it. The earliest entry was dated 32 years ago. Douglas said he wouldn't leave Catherine. I begged. He said he cared about me, but his family came first. I wasn't his family. I was his mistake. I turned the page. I'm pregnant. I told him. He wants to be part of the baby's life. I said no. If I can't have him, he doesn't get to have her. That's fair. The word fair was underlined. Twice. Further in, an entry from when I was 10. She smiles like him. That exact same half smile. I want to look away every time. After Robert died. Douglas called again. His lawyer called. I hung up both times. Thea will never know. After Douglas died. He's gone, and I feel nothing. Then, in smaller handwriting, squeezed into the margin. That's a lie. I feel everything. I hate that I still feel everything. And the final entry. 1 week before surgery. The envelope will tell her the truth. Let her carry his name. Let her find out the man she came from chose his real family over hers, over mine. Let her know what that feels like. I closed the journal. She didn't hate me because I was different. She hated me because I was his. Aunt Patricia came to the cottage on a Sunday. Maggie had set out tea on the porch, sweet tea in a glass pitcher, the kind with condensation running down the sides. Patricia sat in the rocking chair, hands folded tight in her lap, looking like a woman who'd rehearsed a confession, but still wasn't ready. I knew, she said. Not everything, but enough. I waited. Your mother told me once, Thanksgiving, maybe 15 years ago. She'd had 3 glasses of wine, and she leaned over during the dishes and said, Thea isn't Roberts. Just like that. Then she turned on the faucet and started scrubbing a casserole pan like she hadn't said anything at all. What did you do? I asked. I pretended I didn't hear. Patricia looked at her hands. I was afraid of her. Everyone was. She took a breath. But I did one thing. When Douglas's lawyer started looking, 2 years ago, after the judge passed, I sent him a photograph, your school picture from 2nd grade. I mailed it to Whitfield's office in a plain envelope, no return address. The photograph on Prescott's desk, the 5-year-old girl with the gap-toothed smile. That was from you, I said. Patricia nodded, her eyes filled. I should have done more. I know that. I should have told you. I should have told Douglas directly. But your mother, Constance, if she'd found out, she would have... I know what she would have done. I couldn't do more. I just couldn't. I reached across and took her hand. It was trembling. You did enough, I said. It reached him. Patricia pressed a tissue to her eyes. Maggie refilled her tea without a word. The three of us sat on that porch for an hour. We didn't solve anything. We didn't fix the past. But we sat in it together. That was enough. That was what family looked like. Imperfect. Late. But real. Crestfield shifted slowly. The way small towns do. Not with announcements, but with glances, nods, and the quiet recalibration of who gets the benefit of the doubt. The story people told changed. It wasn't Thea Bennett, the odd one out anymore. It was Constance Bennett, the woman who lied for 30 years. Vivian's old Facebook post resurfaced. When someone shows up to take what isn't theirs, remember who was really there. People read it differently now. Screenshots circulated with new captions. Nobody tagged Vivian directly. They didn't need to. Pastor Tom asked to see me after a Wednesday evening service. We stood in the church parking lot under a streetlight. The church will return the $47,000 if the family requests it, he said. I want you to know that. I shook my head. Keep it. My mother wanted it there. At least one thing she did was worth honoring. He looked at me with the kind of expression pastors save for moments that test their training. You've handled this with more grace than most people could, Thea. Not grace, just practice. At work, Paul shook my hand one morning. I heard. I'm glad it worked out. You've always been the steadiest person in this office. He paused. Also, I need you to look at the Brewer file. Life kept going. That was the thing no one tells you about upheaval. It doesn't stop the clock. That Saturday, Maggie invited me to a barbecue at the estate. Extended Prescott family, cousins, in-laws, a few neighbors. I stood at a picnic table in the backyard, holding a paper plate of pulled pork, surrounded by people who looked at me like I'd always been there. For the first time, I sat at a table where nobody asked why I was in the frame. Ruth Calloway sent a letter the following week. Handwritten, brief. Your mother told me once, I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. I wrote back, you're not the one who should be. 3 weeks later, Vivian called. I almost didn't answer. I saw her name on the screen and let it ring 4 times. Then something, curiosity maybe, made me pick up. Thea. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Careful, rehearsed. I've been thinking. We're still sisters. Half-sisters technically, but still blood. What do you need, Vivian? A pause. I could hear her swallow. The house has a lien, $65,000. I can't cover it. Greg and we're already stretched. I was wondering if maybe you could help with... No. You haven't even heard what I was going to... You told me I wasn't family. You said it at Mom's funeral, in front of 80 people. You brought a typed document to my apartment and asked me to erase my own name. I kept my voice flat, steady. And now you call because you need money. I was upset. I didn't mean... You meant every word. And I believed you. I paused. So I'm doing exactly what you asked. I'm not acting like family, because according to you, I'm not. Silence on the line, long enough that I thought she'd hung up, then very quietly, I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. You're sorry because the house has a lien, not because you stood at a pulpit and pretended I didn't exist. I ended the call, set the phone on the counter, face down, no trembling, no second-guessing, no rush of guilt or the old familiar pull to smooth things over, to make the peace, to shrink myself back down to a size that made everyone else comfortable. That impulse had lived in me for 31 years. It didn't live here anymore. You drew the line, I said to the quiet kitchen. I'm just standing on the side you put me. 6 months later, I moved into the cottage. It was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a farmhouse sink, a porch that faced east and caught the morning light. The walls were white plaster. The floors were original hardwood, scuffed and warm. It smelled like cedar and old books. Maggie helped me carry boxes. We made 3 trips in her truck, my clothes, my kitchen supplies, a bookshelf I'd built from a kit in my 20s. Dad would have been here with a toolbox, Maggie said, setting down a lamp, and opinions about where everything should go. Sounds about right. He made pancakes every Sunday, burned every single time, she smiled. But we ate them anyway. I still worked at Morris & Hale. The commute was longer now, 35 minutes instead of 12, but I didn't mind. I managed the farmland income on the side, reviewed the lease agreements, tracked the investment account. The numbers were solid, stable, the kind of foundation I'd built my whole career understanding but never owned. Maggie and I had breakfast together every Sunday. She'd bring eggs from her neighbor's chickens. I'd make coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. We'd sit on the porch and talk about nothing important, weather, county news, a documentary she'd watched, a client file that was giving me trouble. Kyle called every few weeks. He'd fixed the truck himself, found steady work at an auto shop in Dalton. Not great money, he said, but it's mine. I didn't offer help. He didn't ask. Vivian didn't call anymore. I didn't call either. We both understood what that silence meant. On my first Sunday in the cottage, I put Judge Prescott's photograph on the bookshelf. Next to it, my college graduation photo. 2 moments no one in the Bennett house ever witnessed. Now they stood side by side, where they belonged. One evening in late October, I sat on the porch with a glass of tea and a blank sheet of paper. The sun was setting, long, slow, golden the way it only gets in Georgia in the fall. The fields were quiet. A hawk circled somewhere over the tree line. I picked up my pen and wrote, "Mom, you wrote one sentence to break me. You spent 30 years making sure I had nothing and no one. You hid my father from me. You hid me from him. You punished a child for a man's decision because he didn't choose you. You loved Douglas Prescott. He didn't leave his wife, and you never forgave him. So you turned your anger into a system. You built a family around a hole shaped like me and made sure everyone knew I was the piece that didn't fit. The envelope was supposed to be your last word, your final punishment. You wanted me to read that sentence and collapse, in front of Vivian, in front of Kyle, in front of everyone. It didn't work. You handed me the one thing nobody else could, the truth about where I came from. And the truth had a name and a trust, and a daughter named Maggie who'd been waiting for me. I don't forgive you. I don't hate you either. Hating you would mean carrying you, and I've carried you long enough. I'm not your reminder anymore. I'm not your weapon against a dead man. I'm not the mistake you couldn't look at. I'm just me, and I'm enough. I folded the letter, didn't seal it, didn't mail it. I opened the drawer beside my bed and placed it next to the original envelope, cream-colored, torn open, my name in blue ink. 2 letters, one from her, one from me. She had the first word, I had the last. A few weeks later, I ran into the florist on Main Street. Martha, a woman who'd sold Constance flower arrangements every Easter for 20 years. Your mother was a regular here, Martha said, wrapping a bouquet of white daisies for me. I always wondered why she never mentioned 3 children. She said it lightly, casually, the way people in small towns say devastating things while making change. I paid and walked out. I drove to Crestfield Memorial Cemetery. Robert Bennett's grave was near the back, under a magnolia tree. Simple headstone. Robert James Bennett, 1957 to 2016, beloved husband and father. I set the daisies on the grass. You were kind, I said. You never treated me like I didn't belong. You never raised your voice. You slipped me birthday money and ruffled my hair and pretended everything was normal. I knelt and straightened the flowers. You weren't my biological father, but you were decent. And in that house, decent was rare. I stood, brushed the grass off my knees. On the way back to the car, I passed Constance's plot. Newer headstone, polished granite, a spray of silk flowers Vivian must have placed. Constance Marie Bennett, 1962 to 2025. Devoted mother and woman of faith. I kept walking, I didn't stop. At the grocery store that afternoon, 3 people said hello to me by name. Not because I was a Prescott now, not because of the trust money, but because of how I'd moved through the last 6 months, without spectacle, without cruelty, without a single public word against anyone. The town didn't change its mind about me. It just heard the full story for the first time. Robert gave me kindness, I said to myself as I loaded grocery bags into my car. Douglas gave me identity. And Constance, she gave me strength, by accident. Night. The cottage is quiet. A lamp glows on the side table. The windows are open and a warm breeze comes through, carrying the sound of crickets and the distant rustle of pecan leaves. I sit on the couch with a book in my lap. I'm not reading. I'm looking at the shelf. The envelope is there. Cream-colored, torn open, the blue ink faded just slightly at the edges. For Thea. My mother's handwriting. Her last act of cruelty, propped up like a trophy on a shelf she never imagined I'd own. Beside it, Judge Prescott's portrait. Stern in the photograph, but Maggie says he laughed more than anyone she knew. I believe her. I can see it in his eyes. My eyes. Next to that, my graduation photo. Cap and gown. 22 years old. Nobody from the Bennett family in the audience. And next to that, a new photo. Maggie and me at the Prescott barbecue. Paper plates, sweet tea, matching smiles. I reach out and touch the envelope. Just the edge. I don't need to open it again. I have it memorized. 1 sentence, 14 words, designed to be a demolition. My mother thought that envelope would bury me. She thought I'd read that sentence, crumble in shame, and disappear from the Bennett story for good. She arranged the will reading like a stage, the audience, the build-up, the grand reveal, and she cast me as the one who loses. She miscalculated. I'm Thea Bennett. I'm 31 years old. I'm the daughter of a judge I never met, and a mother who wished I didn't exist. I live in a cottage on land that was always meant for me, beside a sister I found 30 years late. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. The envelope was supposed to be my nothing. It became my everything. Thank you for staying with me through this. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, I need you to do one thing. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the envelope? The photograph on his desk? Vivian's face when she realized what her mother actually left her? Whatever it was, I want to hear it. And if this story reminded you of something you went through, a family that made you feel invisible, a truth that set you free, a boundary you finally had the courage to draw, type, I stood up in the comments. Because that's what this was about. Standing up. Not with fists, not with revenge, just with the truth and 2 steady feet. If you want more stories like this, people who found their strength when everything was stacked against them, check the description below. I've linked a few you'll love. I'm Thea, and I'm really glad you were here.